The morning sky over the Pacific Ocean was quiet and calm. Below, the ocean looked endless, shining softly under the sun. A few clouds floated gently, and far away small islands were barely visible. High in the sky, the air was cold, and the steady hum of airplane engines filled the silence. Nothing about the day warned that danger was close. Far above the water, an American fighter plane flew smoothly through the sky. Inside the cockpit was Major Richard Bong. By the summer of 1944, Bong was already famous among pilots. On the ground, he was shy and soft-spoken, but in the air, he was confident and focused. He had shot down more enemy planes than any other American pilot in history. He flew a powerful plane called the P-38 Lightning, which had 2 engines and was very fast, especially when diving. Bong didn't fly to be a hero. He didn't show off. He flew carefully and thoughtfully, always planning his next move. He treated flying like a puzzle that had to be solved the right way. On this day, that skill would be tested. The mission started normally. Bong was flying a patrol over enemy territory. American planes were moving closer to Japan, and the skies were dangerous. Japanese pilots were still very skilled, and many flew the Zero, a light and fast fighter plane. The Zero could turn quickly and was hard to outmaneuver. It couldn't take much damage, but if it surprised an enemy, it could be very dangerous. Bong knew this. He had fought Zeros before and respected the pilots who flew them. As he watched the sky, something caught his eye. Small, dark dots. At first, they were far away. Bong leaned forward, squinting. His experience told him these weren't birds or friendly planes. They were climbing fast. There were 9 Japanese Zeros. They were flying toward the patrol area. Bong was alone at that moment, separated from his teammates by clouds. He was outnumbered, 9 planes against 1. Many pilots would have turned away. Bong did not. Instead, he became very calm. He checked his plane. Fuel was good, ammunition was full. Both engines were working perfectly. His plane felt strong beneath him. Rather than rushing in, Bong climbed higher. Being higher in the sky gave him an advantage. It meant more speed when diving and more choices during the fight. He placed the bright sun behind him so the enemy pilots would have trouble seeing him clearly. The Japanese pilots kept climbing, not knowing Bong was above them. Bong gently lined up his plane behind the last enemy aircraft. The P-38's guns were all in the nose, so wherever he aimed, all the bullets would hit together. He picked one target, the last Zero in the line. Bong pushed the nose of his plane downward and dove. His plane sped up quickly. Wind rushed past the cockpit. The Zero grew larger in front of him. At just the right moment, Bong fired. Bright tracer bullets flew straight into the enemy plane. Smoke burst out, and the Zero lost control, spinning downward toward the ocean. One enemy plane was gone. The other Zeros reacted right away. They scattered in every direction, turning sharply and climbing fast. The sky suddenly felt crowded and dangerous. Bong didn't try to turn tightly with them. That was what the Zero did best. Instead, he used his speed. He pulled his plane upward, climbing fast. Some enemy planes tried to follow, but they couldn't keep up. At the top of his climb, Bong rolled his plane over and dove again. He struck quickly. Another Zero flew into his path, and Bong fired a short burst. The enemy plane broke apart in midair. 3. The fight had only lasted a few minutes, but it felt much longer. Bong was getting tired, and his supplies were running low. Still, he stayed focused. The enemy pilots began to hesitate. They had expected an easy fight. Instead, they had found a pilot who knew exactly what he was doing. Bong climbed once more, using the bright sun to hide his next move. Below him, the battle was still going on, and the hardest part was yet to come. The sky was no longer calm. Planes were racing in every direction. Engines roared. Sunlight flashed off spinning wings as the fight continued high above the ocean. Richard Bong was still alone, and the danger was not over. There were 6 enemy planes left. The Japanese pilots had learned quickly. They stopped attacking one at a time and began working together. Some climbed higher, others stayed lower, waiting for Bong to make a move. They were trying to trap him. Bong noticed everything. He had spent years learning how to read the sky. He could tell what another pilot was about to do just by how their plane moved. He kept changing direction so no one could surprise him. Suddenly, an enemy plane dove straight toward him from above. Bong turned sharply just in time. Bullets flew through the air where his plane had been a moment earlier. His body felt heavy as he pulled hard on the controls. The enemy plane zoomed past him. That was a mistake. Bong quickly turned his plane around and fired. The enemy plane was hit and spun out of control, falling toward the clouds below. 4 enemy planes were left. Before Bong could relax, another enemy plane flew past him, firing wildly. His plane shook and warning lights flashed. For a moment, one engine didn't sound right, but it kept running. Bong stayed focused. He pushed his plane forward and flew downward, picking up speed. His plane was faster than the others, and that speed helped him escape before the enemy could surround him. 2 enemy planes gave up the chase. 2 stayed. Bong flew just above the clouds, then suddenly pulled his plane up and rolled to the side. 1 enemy pilot followed too closely and couldn't react in time. Bong fired. The enemy plane burst into flames and fell away. Only 1 enemy plane remained. Now the sky felt strangely quiet. The last Japanese pilot didn't rush in. Instead, the 2 planes circled each other carefully, like 2 birds watching for the right moment to move. Bong checked his plane. His fuel was getting low. He didn't have much time. The enemy plane suddenly dove, pretending to attack, then pulled up sharply, trying to trick Bong into turning. Bong didn't fall for it. He climbed straight up instead. The enemy followed, but its plane struggled as it climbed higher. Bong waited until the very top of the climb, then tipped his plane over and dove. As he passed the enemy plane, Bong fired. Smoke poured from the enemy's engine. The plane shook, turned, and began falling toward the ocean far below. The fight was over. Bong flew straight and steady now, catching his breath. His hands shook a little as the excitement faded. His plane was damaged, but it was still flying. A few moments later, friendly planes appeared through the clouds. His teammates had finally found him. They stared at Bong's battered plane and the empty sky around it. Later, when someone asked how many enemy planes he had shot down, Bong answered calmly, 6. To him, it was just another mission completed. But to everyone else, it was an amazing story. 1 pilot, alone, using skill and calm thinking to survive when the odds were against him. And far above the ocean, the sky slowly returned to silence. After the fight, the sky was quiet again. The ocean below stretched forever, calm and blue. Richard Bong was still flying his plane, but now he could finally think clearly. The fight had been intense, and his body was tired. But his plane, the P-38, was still in one piece, even if it had some bullet holes and scratches. One engine was running hotter than usual, but everything was under control. Bong stayed focused. He knew the hardest part wasn't over yet. He still had to fly home safely. He kept his plane steady, checking the engines and fuel. Every sound, every vibration mattered. Many pilots had survived fights only to have accidents on the way home. Bong didn't want that to happen to him. Finally, he could see the airfield far below. His teammates were already there, ready to help. Bong carefully lowered his landing gear and touched down smoothly. The plane rolled to a stop, and the ground crew rushed over. Bong climbed out of the cockpit. He looked calm, almost ordinary. There was no celebration, no cheering. He handed his helmet to a crewman and smiled politely. Someone asked him, "How many did you get?" Bong thought for a moment, remembering the fight. Then he said quietly, 6. Word of what he had done spread quickly.
6 enemy planes taken down alone. Other pilots stared in disbelief, but Bong didn't boast. To him, it was just part of his job. Later, in the official reports, Bong explained exactly what happened. He described how he used the sky to his advantage, climbed and dove at the right times, and stayed calm under pressure. There was no exaggeration, just facts. The fight became an example for other pilots, how to survive when outnumbered, how to make smart choices, and how staying calm could save your life. Bong continued flying more missions. He kept getting victories, but each one was never about glory. He was careful and thoughtful, always thinking about how to stay alive while doing his job. Eventually, the commanders decided he had done enough. Bong was ordered to stop flying combat missions and return home. Even though he didn't want to stop, he understood. His flying in the war was over. But people would always remember what he had done, the day he faced 9 enemy planes and flew home safely. Not because he wasn't scared, not because he was lucky, because he was prepared, patient, and smart. And in the endless sky above the Pacific, that made all the difference.
After Richard Bong returned home from the fight, life continued, but the war in the Pacific didn't stop. Other pilots were still flying dangerous missions. The enemy planes were still out there, and every patrol could be life-threatening. But Bong had left a lasting example. Pilots talked about him. They talked about how he stayed calm, how he used the sky to his advantage, and how he never rushed a fight. They shared his lessons with new pilots. His way of thinking helped them survive battles and stay alive. Back in the United States, people were eager for heroes. Bong became famous. Newspapers wrote stories about him. Crowds cheered. He received medals and honors for his incredible achievements. But Bong didn't do it for fame. He stayed humble. He gave credit to his plane, his training, and the men he flew with. He didn't like talking about combat in detail. He didn't brag about the planes he had defeated. Even after the war, Bong wanted to keep flying. He loved airplanes, and now he was flying new, faster planes called jets. Jets were different. They could fly higher and faster than the planes of the war, but they were also more dangerous. Test flying a new plane was risky. There were no enemies to fight, but if something went wrong, the pilot had to act perfectly. Bong approached it the same way he approached combat, carefully, thoughtfully, and with respect for the machine. He studied every system and prepared for every possibility. He stayed calm no matter what. But one day, during a test flight, something went wrong. His jet lost power, and there wasn't enough time or space to recover. The plane crashed, and Richard Bong died doing what he loved, flying. The nation was shocked. The pilot who had survived so many battles and faced impossible odds in the sky was gone. Even so, Richard Bong is remembered not for how he died, but for how he lived. He is remembered for staying calm in the middle of danger, for using his intelligence and skill, and for making smart choices when everything around him was chaos. He is remembered for the day he faced 9 enemy planes all by himself and flew home safely. Not because he was fearless, not because he was lucky, but because he was prepared, smart, and brave in the right way. And above the endless blue of the Pacific Ocean, his story still soars. Even after the war, Richard Bong's story continued to inspire people, especially young pilots and anyone who dreamed of flying. Back home, children read about him in books and newspapers. They imagined soaring high above the clouds in a powerful fighter plane, feeling the wind rush past and looking down at the tiny, sparkling ocean below. They learned that being a great pilot wasn't just about being brave. It was about thinking, staying calm, and making smart decisions. Bong's example showed them that sometimes the hardest battles are not just about fighting. They are about staying calm under pressure, trusting your training, and being prepared for anything. Even though Richard Bong was no longer flying, his lessons were still alive. Pilots who had flown with him shared stories about how he planned every move, how he never panicked, and how he used the sky itself as part of his strategy.
Younger pilots remembered him when they faced their own dangerous missions, thinking, what would Bong do? But Bong's story wasn't just about airplanes, it was about life. He showed that being quiet, careful, and respectful didn't make someone weak, it could make them stronger than anyone expected. He showed that preparation and skill mattered more than luck. He showed that courage wasn't about rushing into danger, it was about knowing when to act and how to act wisely. In schools and classrooms, teachers told his story as an example of discipline and focus. See, they said, this is how someone can face huge challenges and come out successful, not by luck, but by planning and calm thinking. Even decades later, pilots studying aviation still learn from Bong. Flight schools teach new pilots about his dogfighting techniques, explaining how he used altitude, speed, and the sun to his advantage. They explain that while airplanes have changed, the lessons of focus, preparation, and calm thinking never go out of style. For Richard Bong, every flight was a lesson. Every dogfight was a test, not of luck, not of chance, but of knowledge, preparation, and self-control. And the way he fought that day against 9 enemy planes alone remained the clearest example of all, that even when the odds seemed impossible, skill and courage can turn the impossible into reality. His story also reminds us that life is fragile. Even the most careful and skilled people can face accidents. That's why preparation, learning, and respect for your tools and for life itself matter so much. Bong's life shows that what we do with the time we have is more important than the dangers we face. So when we look up at the sky or imagine ourselves trying something difficult, we can remember Richard Bong. He didn't just fly planes, he showed what it means to face fear, think carefully, and act wisely. And in the endless blue above the Pacific, where one small fighter once danced alone among 9 enemy planes, his spirit still soars. Because Richard Bong's story isn't just a story about war, it's a story about courage, intelligence, and using your mind to overcome even the toughest challenges.